Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be with you. We're live, we're national on this Thursday night. Our telephone number, if you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, get your calls in early, 833-482-5337, 8334-Valdez, and like usual, there's plenty to discuss. A federal judge blocked Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. And again, this was the result of what happened a week ago in the Supreme Court. So I'm interested to see how this is going to play out, because the courts are playing, I think, a dangerous game. One, they're truly eroding the confidence that the American people has in the judiciary. And two, they keep losing. These lower courts keep losing when it gets to the Supreme Court. And at some point, I think Chief Justice Roberts or one of the other justices that may oversee that particular section, they need to admonish these people and say, hey, look, you're out of line. This is clearly a game that you're playing, and it's got to stop. This partisan politics, this lawfare can't continue. I don't know how that's going to play out, but I can only imagine that if the Supreme Court is saying you can move forward with this because we don't think that nationwide injunctions are a thing, that would put Trump back in. But apparently this federal judge disagrees out of New Hampshire. Their claim is that the judge says, Judge Joseph LaPlante, that he's going to issue a written ruling by the end of the day today, explaining his decision. The injunction also narrows down the scope of the class to infants, removing parents from the case. So it seems like they're just trying to remedy what the Supreme Court said so that they could get around it. But I don't think it's going to work. Personally, it just doesn't look like it's like a district court. It looks like a district court trying to stop the president of the United States. And I think that was the spirit behind their decision, as I understood it. Again, I'm not a legal scholar here, but I think the president should be able to enact an executive order, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to. So we'll see if I'm right or wrong on this one, but I think Trump is right. I think the judge is wrong. Call me crazy. Anyway. Wanted to get into something else. Jewish Democrats. Jewish Democrats are now getting together. They're sounding the alarm on Democrat Socialist New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, who I call Mad Manny. Why? Because Zohran, the moron, Mad Manny, he is obviously trying to change everything. Outside of the scope of the job he's running for, he doesn't care. He's a state assemblyman, and he's like, I'm going to change everything. And he has refused to condemn the phrase, globalize the intifada. He's refused to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And, of course, this is a time right now where we probably haven't seen this much anti-Semitism out and about since, the war. So, and that's my speculation, of course, but, I mean, I don't think New York City's been this hot since at least the Crown Heights riots. Now, I don't know how many people care, because I think it's become popularized to be antagonistic towards Jews, which is a sad thing. But I think that New York City has more Jews than, I think, anywhere else besides Israel. So I think they're going to care. And the fact that this is just such a flagrant disregard for the electorate, for the constituency that's there, whether, just because they may not vote for you or you think that they may not vote for you, doesn't mean that you just get to kind of write them off. Right? Imagine President Trump saying, well, I'm here, my fellow Americans that lean conservative, not you leftists, right? The only person he ever excludes, it's not a person, it's the fake news media, right? And it's pretty funny when he does that. Anyway, I don't know what happens here, but this guy, Zoran, the moron, Mad Manny, he's getting a lot of headlines. I try to only talk about him as much as I think it's important, and I just gave you my 2 cents on this, but I mean, he's becoming very popular very fast, whether it's by hook or by crook, right? Whether it's, like they say, all news is good news. We'll see. What else do we got here? There was something else I wanted to bring to your attention, because there's a number of things I want to talk about, right? I wanted to get the view of a doctor regarding the testimony and the dodging of Biden's doctor, not able to say or unwilling to say, here's what's going on, here's the deal, when he was deposed. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I also want to talk about the, where did it go? The story about the social media guy, right? Is the guy who makes memes. He went by, I think his name was Ricky Vaughn online. In real life, his name was Douglas Mackey. And they locked him up. They threw away the key because he said something I've been saying for years, which is not necessarily what he told the Hillary people, your election's whatever, the other day. I've been telling Democrats that forever. When people would ask me, hey, when's election day? I'd say, well, if you're voting for Republicans, it's tomorrow. If you're voting for whatever, it's, I'd say 2 days from now. It's Friday. It's Monday, whatever. It was a joke. And I think it was perceived as a joke. And I got to be honest, even if it wasn't perceived as a joke, if you're not some sort of, if you're not part of the campaign, if you're not a part of the government, what do I care if you lie to me? Like, what crime is that? If I go to you and I say, hey, when's election day? And you go, oh, it's a week from Tuesday. And you're wrong. You're wrong. I can argue that you were trying to get me to vote on a different day so that I wouldn't vote because maybe you knew I was a Trump person. But all that stuff aside, come on. This is real life. In real life, I can't hold you to the perfect standard that I've created for you in my mind, right? That's not how life really works. I can only hold you to the standard that exists, right? I can't make up an arbitrary standard and just say, oh my gosh, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, when there's no reasonable expectation for that. So anyway, we're scheduled to talk with Doug Mackey on his conviction being overturned by a federal appeals court. So I'm really interested in hearing that, because this was a joke, and this man was incarcerated for a joke. And I think that's insanity to me. Anyway, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about so many people, especially during COVID, they started going to therapy online. They started using different apps because they couldn't go see their therapist anymore. And some of them needed a therapist that they didn't know they needed prior to, because of the way COVID, kind of hit everybody upside the head. And now we have a bunch of people that maybe haven't really healed. At least that's what a couple of psychologists are suggesting. They're just kind of become professional patients, right? Professional people that are perpetual patients that just continue to seek talk therapy with no end goal or even plan for victory or goals or, check marks along the way. So we're going to talk about that with one of our favorite psychotherapists who will be joining us a little bit later as well. Plus, all of your phone calls. We have a lot of time tonight to do some open phone across America, so we'll be taking calls every hour. If you want to get in on that, feel free. You're welcome to do it. You know the phone number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon the physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
I mean, this is wholly unsurprising because he has something to hide. It's very obvious. But the question is, is this a congressional issue? Do you keep trying to put the screws to the guy because he's not going to answer a thing? Or, I ask you, does this rise to the level of criminality? Should there be a criminal investigation of this doctor and what happened?
Well, that would be separate from him pleading this. And that sort of, I think, begs that bigger question of, is there a difference between an inference and then the legal protection? So, Lisa, to that point, the only Democrat in the room, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, said, oh, come on, it's ridiculous that someone pleading the Fifth should rise to the level of an assumption of covering up criminal behavior, right? And that's an admonition by judges in court. They specifically say, just because someone pleads the Fifth, you cannot infer that. But at the end of the day, why aren't you saying anything if you don't have someone to hide?
Why aren't you saying anything if you don't have anything to hide? Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And they're not the only ones asking that question. There's a lot of people asking the question, why is Biden's doctor pleading the Fifth? And why isn't he saying something like, look, I'm not here to violate doctor-patient confidentiality. I've got to sit here and respect the privilege, and it's the president's to waive. So, sorry, I got to plead the Fifth here, right? I think people would have accepted that had he played it that way, but it seems like there might be more to it. So I want to bring in someone who knows a little bit about this, a lot more than me, right? Because he himself is a physician, and he's been on the program before. He's also a candidate for lieutenant governor in the state of North Carolina and a colonel in our beloved military. Colonel Dr. Josh McConkey, welcome back, sir.
Thank you, bud. Thank you very much for having me on the show, Rich.
You bet, you bet. So you heard that clip there, and I just want to add insult to injury a little bit. You also have James Comer, chairman of the Oversight Committee, who also had questions regarding Biden's doctor. Listen to this.
Chairman, can you tell us what happened?
I can tell you exactly what happened. Dr. O'Connor pleaded the Fifth Amendment, and I'm gonna read the first two questions that were asked. Were you ever told to lie about the president's health? He pleaded the Fifth Amendment. He would not answer that question. The second question, did you ever believe President Biden was unfit to execute his duties? Again, President Biden's White House position pleaded the Fifth Amendment. This is unprecedented, and I think that this adds more fuel to the fire, that there was a cover-up. I believe that this adds legitimacy to the Tapper book and the other books that are in the works that are about to come out that shows there was a lot of suspicious activity taking place in the White House with respect to the president's health.
So, Dr. McConkey, what do you think here? Is this unprecedented? I mean, it might be in terms of presidential physicians, but yourself as an emergency room physician, does that sound normal? Would you answer that way?
This was absolutely shocking. I have been texting my fellow physician colleagues around the country all afternoon and this evening. I can't believe he pled the Fifth on two very simple questions. As a physician, I definitely respect that patient-physician privilege. Those questions were 100% fair game, flat out. Were you ever told to lie about the president's health? And he pled the Fifth. I'm shocked.
Yeah, listen, I was too. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one. I have a little bit of a bias towards Biden and his Democrat friends. But I said, you know what? I got to talk to a doctor about this because this is serious business. And I can't imagine how any physician would want to answer, to plead the Fifth when asked, have you ever been asked to lie? I mean, isn't it like something that would cost you your medical license if you were asked to lie?
Oh, absolutely, because you are falsifying medical records. If you're lying about the president, and this is let alone the most powerful person in the world who carries the nuclear football. So for me, the ethics and the openness and being true as the president's physician needs to be paramount to anything. And when you can't answer that simple question, were you ever told to lie? This is for me as a physician. This is about as big as Watergate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I think this is bigger than Watergate. In Watergate, we're talking about people that broke into some campaign office. Here, we're talking about covering up the health of the commander-in-chief. And like you said, the guy who's got his finger on the trigger, who thankfully did not pull any triggers and likely didn't have any finger on anything because he didn't know what was going on half the time. But it's concerning. And, you know, I've made fun of this, you know, like most people have. But at the same time, I saw the serious side of it, where I saw so many of the symptoms that Biden was displaying looked a lot like my dad, who was struggling with dementia that was the result of a traumatic brain injury. And I talked about it often on the air, but it's an interesting position to be in when you can only call things out from the sidelines, because ultimately our fate as we the people was resting in the hands of the cabinet, Kamala Harris and all the rest of the cabinet secretaries. And to my knowledge, nobody ever said anything that they were even concerned. Is that a concern for you?
Well, it's extremely concerning. You know, I'm a physician. I've practiced medicine for 20 years. I was a Duke professor. There were clearly signs of dementia. You know, what you saw in the media, I knew people that have worked with the president on presidential detail and had some stories that really corroborated what was going on. And so that cabinet had been asked several times, and they all completely lied, said, it's the sharpest they've ever seen him. You've never seen him behind the closed doors. And it was, as a physician, it was just unbelievable. Anybody who practices medicine or works with geriatrics and works with dementia, everyone could see what was going on. It didn't take until that debate where he just absolutely fumbled. It's crazy.
Well, Doc, I agree with you. I think it's crazy. And I want to get your take on a couple of things, not the least of which is the impact that the big, beautiful bill is going to have on health care. I know that you're still a practicing physician, so let me remind the audience that you are a candidate for lieutenant governor in the state of North Carolina, an Air Force colonel, a board-certified emergency room physician, and you've written a book. And folks, I recommend getting a copy of this book for yourself and one to give away, especially during these summer months where people are catching up on a lot of reading. The book is called Be the Weight Behind the Spear. And the last time we had Dr. McConkey on, we talked about the book and its namesake. So check out the book. It's available on Amazon. And keep it locked right here. We're coming right back with Dr. Josh McConkey, candidate for LG in North Carolina, and me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Many rural hospitals are bracing for funding cuts and potential closures that could be implemented by the Big Beautiful Bill. Washington correspondent Jesse Turner reports on the ongoing health care debate from Capitol Hill.
This is not partisan. This is not political. The facts are the facts.
Democrats like Louisiana Congressman Troy Carter say it's easy to see the impact of President Trump's budget bill on rural hospitals.
It will close rural hospitals now. Very plain, very simple.
We're not going to do anything that's going to hurt our rural hospitals.
The legislation includes about $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, which would restrict reimbursements to rural hospitals. But Republicans, like Alabama Congressman Robert Aderholt, argue the Medicaid changes are necessary.
A lot of the cuts are really just trying to focus on where there's been a lot of waste and fraud.
Republicans note the legislation also includes a new $25 billion 5-year fund for rural hospitals. But Democrats say they're not taking the bait.
So you're like taking away with one hand and like giving a little back? I mean, that's kind of a joke.
$25 billion is a drop in the bucket.
Congressman Hank Johnson and Josh Gottheimer argue these cuts would lead to higher health care costs overall. But Nebraska Republican Congressman Adrian Smith says this is about keeping people on private health insurance.
Rather than having policies that encourage people to leave those policies and instead head over toward Medicaid, which is oftentimes an insufficient reimbursement for the hospitals themselves.
The National Rural Health Association predicts more than half of states would see at least a 20% funding cut.
That's a report there from WUTR and WFXV. And I want to get some reaction to that report, as well as some analysis on the Big Beautiful Bill and the impact it's going to have on healthcare from our guest. He's an Air Force colonel, a board-certified emergency physician, Dr. Josh McConkey, candidate for lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and the author of Be the Weight Behind the Spear. Dr. Josh McConkey, what is the, I guess, your initial gut reaction to the report that you just heard that there's going to be closures in rural hospitals and that this is throwing people off Medicaid?
So, number one, they have been gutting Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement for over a decade. So what they won't tell you is they've been having hospital closures in rural areas all across the country, my home state here in North Carolina, for the last 10 years. And a lot more around 2022, 2023. So that had been happening. This bill specifically addresses that issue, and it was actually doubled to $50 billion for rural health care. So that was big. And the Democrats just cry, the sky is falling every time you make some cuts. And when you read the bill, those vulnerable populations, if you're a single mother, you have children under 14 years old, if you have a disability or you're a disabled veteran, there is no impact to your health care and your access to Medicaid. But if you're an able-bodied male, or if you're 25, you're 30 years old, and you're completely able to work, just those 80-hour work requirements, that's 80 hours a month. I used to work 80 hours a week or more. So like 80 hours a month, that's nothing.
Yeah. And listen, I get it. This has always been a social safety net program, Medicaid, that was designed for, the chronically ill, people that, my parents were both very sick, and they wouldn't be able to have met this 80-hour a work thing requirement. And I think people that are that ill can seek that type of support, and it seems like a fair requirement for me, because if you can work, you have options where you can get better health insurance than Medicaid or Medicare or whatever is being offered. Although Medicare, I think a lot of doctors prefer to take Medicare versus Medicaid. But the bottom line here is, I think you're right. The Democrats seem to be poo-pooing the idea and constantly, screaming to the detriment of every last American. And this thing hasn't really hit the ground running just yet.
Yeah, they have been killing rural health care since the Obamacare plan. I've got several colleagues that do rural health care in Nebraska, here in North Carolina, and those shrinking reimbursement rates are just getting worse and worse. They keep kicking that can down the road year after year. It is impossible as a solo practitioner to go out there and take care of people in rural areas. And that's because of federal government intervention. I think that push on getting people off of Medicaid and get them working, number one, it's a mental health issue. You take pride in work. You take pride in contributing to your community. And the mental health crisis that we have right now, there's a huge portion of that. They're just sitting home on the couch. They're able to work. I see this as an emergency physician. I see the anxiety, the depression, and the suicide. And I think that getting people back to work and off of Medicaid is just as important for mental health as it is for their fiscal health.
Yeah, I don't doubt that in any way. Now, the Big Beautiful Bill is passed. You mentioned that this issue with rural health care has been happening for a while. I'd read about this some years ago, and the push at the time, they were saying they didn't have enough doctors. There was a physician shortage, and this is why they weren't doing what they were doing. And, of course, coupled with how reimbursement for Medicaid was just not great, and it prevented a lot of physicians from being able to offer these services. But also there was a push to put family nurse practitioners in a lot of these rural areas just to provide basic primary care. And And I've seen that happen, even in urban areas. What are your thoughts on that, and has that been the case?
Now, the nurse practitioners, your mid-level providers, physician assistants, they fill a very important role. Now, there's been an encroachment into federal government programs. I know the VA hospital in particular has been trying to push. I'm a veteran myself. I get care at the Durham VA hospital here in North Carolina, and they've really taken it to another extreme where they're almost pushing out physicians because nurse practitioners are cheaper. And there is a difference in that quality of care. Personally, me as a physician with thousands and thousands of hours of training and 20 years of experience, you are going to see some differences and some changes in that quality of care with someone with that less of an education. But I mean, it's overall, they serve a good role in some rural areas, but it's not the answer to the problem.
Right, and I think it was presented as such a while back, saying, "Oh, if we don't have enough doctors, then we'll hire that one doctor who can supervise, 4 or 5 nurse practitioners or physician assistants to provide, the necessary level of care." And I don't know that is going to cut it everywhere, especially when you're mentioning yourself, right? That you're a physician with 20 years of experience. God bless you, but that's not always the case, right? I've been to places where I meet doctors and I'm like, oh, well, I can't understand them sometimes. I asked them where they went to school. They went to school somewhere in another country, which again, I'm sure they passed the MCATs and whatever they had to, or whatever the exam is to transfer licensure over. But it begs the question: why aren't we creating more American-born physicians?
Well, I think the real answer is the issue is corporatization of healthcare. So you see these big hospital systems that are bought out by hedge funds, and they're really practicing medicine without a license. And so that right there, they try to find like the cheapest option. I don't think it is necessarily has to do with where you went to school. I mean, it's more about kind of experience and your specialty.
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
what they've done is they've really pushed physicians almost out and try to just scoot in the emergency department. You'll see a lot of mid-level providers that are trying to pick up that slack. That it's too critical. There's too much high acuity. And I have definitely seen a drop in the quality of healthcare the more mid-level providers you have. But the corporations have figured out it's cheaper. So they come in, they take over a department, and they just get rid of physicians and throw in mid-levels.
How do you fix that?
Well, we need to get corporate medicine, the corporate businesses out of medicine. So when you hear all these issues with pre-authorization, those types of things, a lot of people have been unhappy with that. Those are just corporate figureheads and people sitting behind a desk trying to determine whether someone gets some life-saving care or treatments for cancer. And they'll do these pre-authorizations just to try to deny people, and a certain amount of people will just give up. And it's practicing medicine without a license. It's a big problem in American healthcare.
Do you think this is kind of exclusive to the health insurance companies that don't want to pay out for this care? Or are you seeing it across the board in other medical outfit operators?
Well, so a lot of it starts with CMS, with your Medicaid and Medicare, what they choose to cover and not cover. And as they diminish those reimbursements, as soon as the corporate healthcare system sees that, they follow right to suit. So if the government can save a buck on it, we're going to save a buck on it as well. And they just kind of fall in line. So a lot of time it is CMS leading the way. And when corporate healthcare, I've seen it from really, I started medical school in 1999 to where things are at now. I mean, we might as well be on a different planet.
What do you think about the current head of CMS, Dr. Oz? President Trump put him there. Do you think there's a lot of promise, being that he was a practicing physician and kind of gets these problems, understands them from the front line?
Well, I know him and the Secretary of Health have really addressed their pre-authorization issue. They're attacking right now, that corporatization of medicine and them practicing medicine without a license. So that's the first step. But I think he has the right people in place.
Outstanding. Dr. Josh McConkey, Colonel, your book is Be the Weight Behind the Spear. Is there a website where people can go to get an autographed copy? And where do people go to learn about you and all of the work you're doing?
Thank you. So yeah, waitbehindthespear.com, WEIGHT, waitbehindthespear.com, and the foundation is waitbehindthespear.com/foundation.
Outstanding. Sir, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate your time. Godspeed.
Thank you.
You bet. And amigos, your thoughts, your calls, your reactions to everything we're talking about, and a little bit more on the news of the day when we return.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Listen, I like your show. It's the best night show there is. I think you got the best spirit, the best emotions. You're real. You're really a good guy.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And I want you to hear this report on birthright citizenship we were supposed to bump in with that I think is going to be a surprise to you. Listen to this.
A federal judge in New Hampshire. A federal judge in New Hampshire just certified a class action for all children born in the United States, no matter who his or her parents are, legal, not legal, citizen, not citizen, and blocked the executive order by Donald Trump from taking effect anywhere in the country. 2 weeks ago, I said this was going to happen. I must have a crystal ball. But after July 27, you have to rely on new litigation that's expected, and they're going to make it a class action. But here's the catch. Just last month, the Supreme Court ruled that federal judges can't issue nationwide injunctions unless it's in the context of the parties before them. So now this class action lawsuit is racing back to the Supreme Court again. And here's what the next battle is going to be. Can federal judges issue nationwide injunctions in the context of a class action lawsuit? They weren't able to issue a nationwide injunction in an action by the states challenging the constitutionality of Trump's executive. My bet, the Supreme Court is going to say, if you're part of the class action, the injunction applies to you. You have to be part of the lawsuit. Join it. And if you don't know about the class action, you're going to be out of luck. But that's, again, my crystal ball guess. But we'll.
So that's the latest on this. Again, this is what he's talking about here is the nationwide injunction case that was just decided, I don't know, 10 days ago or so. In June, 6-3 with the court, 6-3 in the majority. So with the Supreme Court ruling focused on the authority of the lower courts, the justices didn't get into the legality of the particular executive order on birthright citizenship, which obviously will set the tone and the table for this next case that will likely go to the Supreme Court. So I'm curious to see how it goes. Now, the Department of Justice told a federal judge last week that they plan to begin enforcing the birthright citizenship executive order as early as the end of this month in recognition of a 30-day stay that was included in the Supreme Court's ruling. But that's how they want to, they want to act that quickly. So I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. Like I said, my prediction is that the administration is likely going to win again. And maybe there might be some nuanced position here, but I don't see it going too awry, honestly. I think that I can't, I could be wrong, right? It could be that John Roberts may want to punt on this, like he does a lot of times in matters of great import. He decides to say, yeah, you know what? Forget about it. Este no me importa. This one doesn't matter to me, right? He just comes across that way sometimes as like unwilling because he doesn't want to be viewed as political. And I could see him weighing in on that, something big. But instead of looking at it like, hey, I have an opportunity to actually make a difference. Anyway, Good time to take a pause right here. We're going to come back with the rest of your calls, the rest of my thoughts, and so much more. I'm going to drink a little cafecito during the break. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
A couple of minutes to go before we re-rack the show. Let's go to Paul in Boise, Idaho. Paul, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I'll be as quick as I can. My father practiced medicine. He was a doctor in GP, internal medicine. For 44 years he practiced. He was a country doctor. He did house calls until he was 71 years of age at no charge to the customers, to his patients. He would receive food in lieu of, because they were so embarrassed they couldn't pay him. But the people loved him. He gave some of them his home phone number, if you can believe that, given that's one of your patients. He was that type of man. It makes my head ache when I hear about some of the things these guys are doing and calling themselves doctors today. But long story short, I had a thought today about, this guy was actually more powerful than Biden was, this doctor that was pleading the fifth every question. You knew it was coming. It was a matter of time before he got in front of Congress and he did it. But it gave me an idea. You had one Democrat, one independent, and one Republican doctor. You could have three of them looking at the
Yep, I see what you're saying. This way everybody has their take if they've been politicized. It's just a shame that a physician would be politicized in such a way, right? Whatever happened to the Hippocratic oath? Paul, thank you, sir. Amigos, more calls, more action, lots of things. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night and God bless.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to another hour of the program. Thanks for having me. And our phone number, if you want to join us in our late night national town hall conversation, call into the show. Here's the number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And this hour, we're going to get into a number of things. But one of the big things that I want to talk about this hour, and we'll touch back on it, is the story of Douglas Mackey. Right, Douglas Mackey, this poor guy, he made a joke and he went to jail. And that's the way I see that story, and I don't think there's too many other ways to spin it. I remember talking about this when it happened. I'm glad that a appeals court overturned his sentence, his conviction. But, I mean, this was a big deal, right? This is during the Biden years. Social media influencer Douglas Mackey sentenced after conviction for election interference in 2016 presidential race. Listen to this. He was sentenced by United States District Judge Ann Donnelly to 7 months in prison for his role in a conspiracy to interfere with potential voters' rights to vote in the 2016 election for the office of President of the United States. Now, that sounds sinister, right? You read that first sentence, and this, again, is on the Department of Justice website right now. You would think that, well, this guy, clearly, he broke the law. Douglas Mackey, also known as Ricky Vaughn, was previously convicted of the charge of conspiracy against rights at trial by a federal jury in Brooklyn, New York. Mackey was convicted of the charge in March of 2023 following a 3-week-long trial. Breon Peace, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, Acting Assistant Attorney General Nicole Argentieri of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, and James Smith, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI New York Field Office, announced the sentence, saying this: "One of the foundational rights we hold as Americans, a right that many fought so hard to obtain, is the right to vote. The defendant weaponized disinformation in a dangerous scheme to stop targeted groups, including black and brown people and women, from participating in our democracy." And that was, again, according to United States Attorney Peace. And this was so wrong, right? I mean, again, a guy who made a meme, right? It was clearly intended to be humorous. And guess what? Even if it wasn't humorous, even if he was like, hey, if you're a Democrat, you should vote on Sunday. Shame on you for being the pendejo that's going to go and listen to that guy. It's not like he was some sort of elections official or posing as an elections official or anything like that. He didn't do anything like that. He made a joke, and people took the joke the wrong way, decided to make a case out of it, a federal case, and they actually were able to get a conviction. And that shouldn't happen in our country. Now, I know there's critics listening to me right now saying, oh, my God, now Valdez is saying that you should be able to interfere in the election and not go to jail. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to take your head out of your ass, please, and pay attention to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you are allowed to make jokes. And it doesn't matter if you think it's funny or not. I thought that was very funny, the joke. It really is. You know, the Democrats are voting on Election Day. Republicans get to vote next month. You know, I mean, that's funny to me. I'm sorry. It's satirical humor, and that's allowed. And the fact that you had an actual Department of Justice and several individuals, I just read their names, right? Acting Assistant Attorney General Nicole Argentieri, yeah, shame on you. FBI Assistant Director in charge, James Smith, shame on you. Acting, who else? Breon Peace, United States Attorney, Eastern District of New York. You should be embarrassed of bringing a case like this. Like I said, this wasn't some sort of deliberate attempt to defraud people out of being able to vote. This was a joke, and if you were dumb enough to fall for the joke, then the joke is truly on you, and shame on you. Not, let's put this guy in jail. Unbelievable. Really, really was. And the fact that he brought race into it, you can say, hey, look, that was in poor taste. We don't like the fact that you're saying in order to increase black turnout, we're going to have an extra day of voting. Listen, you can say what you want. I don't care what the race was. It's funny to me. And obviously the appeals court today realized that it was funny to them too. Because this wasn't about a case of, was the joke funny? This was a case of, are we allowed to speak in this country? Are we allowed to make any statement we want? Right? And for everybody who's shouting at me right now saying, oh, but what about you can't yell fire in a crowded theater? Listen, those limitations on free speech on the First Amendment, like the fighting words doctrine and things like that, they're fine. This isn't any of those things. If I say, listen, it's Election Day tomorrow, and if you're more than 10 pounds overweight, Election Day for you is going to be next Wednesday. Special day with larger booths. Everybody, who's a little bit more rotund, a little bit bigger in the hips, the thighs, the midsection, a little bit girthier. You're going to have a chance to walk right into those booths without having to wait online. This is going to be Fat People Election Day. Right? Maybe some people think that's funny. Others might think I'm a big jerk. But either way, to give me 7 months in jail for saying something like that, you've got to be kidding me. Right? Or if I say, tomorrow, if you're born a biological male, you get to vote in the election. If you're a biological female, press 1 here and we'll schedule an appointment for you. We'll have our mobile voting unit come out to your home. Shame on you if you believe that. Right? I mean, really, that's my take on this. Buyer beware. Reagan called on us to be informed patriots. So be informed, patriots. Unbelievable. Anyway, we're going to talk about this with Douglas Mackey a little bit more straight ahead. But I started saying this in the last hour. And John Fetterman, you know, I got to tell you, I'm not a fan. But I don't dislike the guy. Every now and again, he's like a broken clock. He's like right twice a day. And the latest clip that I've seen from him is him saying that Democrats are off their rockers. And I think he's right. When you have this candidate for the city of New York mayor, the guy named Zohran Madmani, this guy, not only is he a moron, but Zohran Madmani refuses to condemn the term global intifada. And he refuses to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. So if you can't condemn this stuff, not a good look for you. And this is not coming from me. Listen to this. Here's the quote. To not be willing to condemn the term globalize the intifada just demonstrates Madmani's callous disregard for anti-Semitism and terrorist activity. You know who said that? The former vice chair of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the congresswoman from Florida. She said that to thehill.com. Democrats are coming out against Mamdani because they realize this guy's nuts. He's absolutely nuts. So you got Democrats saying Mamdani's no good. You've got the New York Times saying Mamdani is no good. And then you've got some folks in MAGA saying Mamdani's no good. Let's go with the guy who's Mamdani light, Eric Adams. The guy who's sucking so bad right now he can't get the line. The guy who sucks as mayor so badly that he can't even win the nomination of his own party. His polling is underwater. They just did a poll, right? The number one and number two candidate for the mayor of City, New York right now, or at least as of Monday, 35% Zohran Mamdani, 29% Curtis Sliwa. Yet there's still people out there that are going to try and make the case. There's no way Curtis can win. Oh, there's no way. If you ask me, I don't think there's a way Adams can win. I'm not going to hold my breath here, but man, if I had $1 for every time some conservative Republican tried to make the case to me of why we need elite Eric Adams, I'd be a wealthy man. It's like they refuse to look at what's actually going on. And let me tell you something. This is the same thing they did to Trump. Same exact thing. Anyway, don't count anybody out. We've got ways to go. It's not even Labor Day yet. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations, everybody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Good news for free speech and for conservative influencer Douglas Mackey. A federal appeals court has overturned his conviction. As a reminder, he spent 7 months in prison posting memes about the 2016 election that jokingly suggested supporters of Hillary Clinton could vote by text.
Mackey, or Ricky Vaughn on social media, was sentenced after a jury in 2023 found him guilty of attempting to trick individuals out of exercising their right to vote. The three-judge panel on Wednesday determined that trial evidence failed to prove he engaged in a conspiracy to influence the election.
Mackey had around 58,000 followers when he made the posts, according to the DOJ. And according to trial evidence, over 5,000 people texted the number he included in the memes. It's important to note that around 98% of those respondents received an automated reply that the number was not associated with the Clinton campaign.
So that's the news right there. And again, I can't believe that this even happened when it did happen. But I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to bring in the guest, Douglas Mackey himself. Congratulations, sir. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rich. Great to be here.
Well, I'm really happy that you're not in jail because I talk a lot of smack, and I got to tell you, come election day, I've been making jokes like that for a long time. I've been telling my friends, people always ask me because they know I'm involved in politics, and they say, hey, is election day tomorrow? And I go, sure. If you're voting for Republicans, it's tomorrow. If you're a Democrat, it's the day after. I've been saying that for close to 20 years. And when I saw your case, I thought, oh, my gosh, I could go to jail for something like that. That's nuts to me. Now, I'm going to start off with, you're often described online as an alt-right influencer. Is that what you consider yourself?
So I would say, back, maybe 2016, but I don't know if anybody really says alt-right anymore. I'm just conservative with sort of President Trump aligned with MAGA movement. So that would describe me nowadays.
Yeah, and the other thing that they describe you as is, at least in the complaint that I was reading on the Department of Justice website, as trying to defraud people that were black and brown from being able to vote on a certain day. Do you think that's an accurate depiction?
It's total farce. Yeah, it's incredible. Just like the appellate court said, they lacked evidence for these claims, and it's a total farce. They said that just because in this meme that I shared that I didn't even create, I found on 4chan, there happened to be a black woman in it, so therefore I must be targeting a black woman.
Wow. Unbelievable. So walk us through this, because, again, I remember reading it, and honestly, I talked about it once or twice, and I really thought it wasn't going to go anywhere because it sounded so ridiculous. I thought they're just busting this guy's balls a little bit, but there's no way he's actually going to go to jail. And then that actually happened, right? They tried to put you in jail. They did all these crazy things. So talk to me about how did it snowball?
Yeah, well, it's incredible. The EDNY, it's in the court in Eastern District of New York, Brooklyn, and it includes parts of Long Island, Queens, Staten Island. Those prosecutors in that federal court just get away with murder. This case should have been dropped in the pretrial, and it should have been dropped after the trial because, like the appeals court said, if they lacked evidence, there was no evidence of a conspiracy. I mean, this is, like you said, no harm, no foul. Democrats vote on this day, Republicans vote on that day. Just no harm, no foul. They didn't find any harm or foul. They looked, and they couldn't find a single person who actually fell for this meme. So it's crazy how it snowballed. It should have been tossed out, and finally common sense prevailed. But the problem is in the Eastern District of New York, and quite frankly in federal court, is you get the wrong judge, and there may be a partisan hack, and they just want the outcome no matter what, and they treat the prosecutors like it's their son. Like their son can do no wrong. That they can mislead the court, they can lie, they can commit misconduct, and they never get punished for it.
Yeah, I've seen that, and you could just tell that that's the way that this stuff works. So you post a meme, you're politically active, you're involved, it's a joke. It's even if it wasn't a joke, even if you wanted people to not, I still don't see how that is a crime. If you're exercising free speech, right? You're not doing anything bad. It wasn't like you made a commercial or you were working for the government and lying to people. What was the basis of all of this? Like, how did they look you in the face and say, you're a joker on the internet and we're going to put you in jail for that?
Well, it's even more farcical than you can believe. They actually believe that this was some sort of Russian plot, and they believe that by arresting me and by squeezing another guy, poor guy, that they got him to plead guilty, actually, that they were going to uncover some sort of Russian plot, which, of course, they didn't. This was just people sharing memes that went viral and were trending all over the place. I found it on 4chan. You could have found it in a number of different places.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they look you in the eye and say, this is I mean, they were the only ones that could believe it, along with a group of far-left activists who call themselves misinformation reporters, and also the Hillary Clinton people and these Democrat partisans.
You know, Doug Mackey, what I think is crazy here is, again, let us suppose that Putin and his people did create the meme to create strife, racial strife, to have, these, and they used you as a useful idiot, just for argument's sake. How is that even a crime?
Great question. I mean, I don't think it is a crime. That's a great question. And they didn't really care if there was a crime. All they felt was like, this guy is evil. This guy helped Donald Trump win and Hillary Clinton to lose. So we're going to investigate him. We're going to find some way to pin some kind of crime in the statute book, and that's not the way justice should be done. And that's why they tried to bust me up on this crime, and there was no evidence of a conspiracy because, funny enough, if I was just a lone actor posting this meme by myself, even they admit that would not be a federal crime.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it wouldn't be a federal crime because, it's like they forgot that you're allowed to talk a lot of smack. Not if you work in radio like me. Anybody's allowed to talk a lot of smack. It's America. Doug Mackey, God bless you, brother. I'm glad that you're okay and that you're not going to jail for doing what we all do. Tell everybody that's listening how they can find you and support the work that you're doing moving forward.
Yeah, so we're gonna file civil suit against the federal government, and we're gonna pursue justice. So you can go to memedefensefund.com if you want to pitch into the fight and help also with the legal bills, or go to twitter.com/Doug Mackey Case.
All right, check them out. Follow them online on Twitter and Meme Defense Fund if you want to help the cause. Godspeed to you, brother. I really do wish you the best, and thank you for being here tonight. Congratulations again, Douglas Mackey. Amigos, we're coming right back. Your calls and more coming up right now. Open Phone America with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. And you sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
All right, folks, I want to get your thoughts on what's going on across America. You feel free to call in 833-482-5337 or 833, the number 4, and my last name, Valdez, Valdes. Let's hit the phones. Julie from Chicago is back. Can't keep a good woman down. The deep state wasn't able to keep her off the phone lines. Julie, go right ahead. WLS.
Hi, Rich. Hi, thank you. Calling from Chicago, where, as you know, with our electeds here, I'm in clown world, and that's no offense to any professional clowns out there. But we have a lot of unqualified elected leaders, and we can sit here and talk about them till the cows come home, and we do. But the problem is that, let's face it, the voters put them there. We get the leaders that we deserve. And unfortunately, people, I find, are not informed. They believe the first thing they hear. They don't, use any critical thinking or question things. They take things at a surface level. Look at what our educational system is producing. I'm the daughter of immigrants from Poland. And, so I see things a little differently. And, my parents come from a country where, everybody should know what happened during World War II, but Poland's history is tragic for hundreds of years. And so I understand what things can be like in other parts of the world. The problem is that most Americans don't have any reference point, in my opinion. They think that this is how it is everywhere around the world. And I don't think they realize, number one, exactly how good we have it here. And number two, when it comes to electeds, they're not voting on the issues. They're not looking critically at a candidate to say, hey, is this person qualified to handle this type of job? I mean, look at our mayoral election. We had Mayor Johnson against Paul Vallis. Paul Vallis, a decades experienced, administrator at this level, and he could have easily helped get us on the right path in Chicago, and look at what we ended up with. And it's not just Mayor Johnson. Go down at the local level. Look at some of our aldermen, like radical 25th Ward Alderman Byron Ticho Lopez, that wants to take his whole ward and put it into a TIF district. That's going to be $1 billion of property tax money shaved off and diverted to a slush fund. You know, people, I think, just don't care enough to understand the issues. And so when they're going to vote, if they go to vote, if they get their lazy butts out to vote, they're not voting with their heads. They're not voting, you know, in an informed manner. And this is what we end up with. And so, you know, I really am hoping that we start just collectively shifting the conversation, obviously pointing out what our electeds are doing, but how do we even begin to, Rich, inform people? I mean, I know listening to your show is great, but, you know, I try to stay informed, so I listen to shows like you and I, you know, whatever, but I talk with people. I have my own ways of digging, drilling down into an issue. But what do we do? That's, I think, the core issue.
Well, let me share a couple of thoughts with you, Julie, and I really appreciate your explanation. Very thoughtful. And I agree with you on a lot of that. I'm going to explain a couple of things to you. Number one is there's a harsh reality that I think you're writing off, and that is you are the first generation child of immigrants. You will always have a perspective from your Polish parents that fought off communism, literally, like on their land. And that's something that most Americans have the benefit and have the privilege of never having had to do. So while your statement's accurate, it's also, I think you can't get blood from a stone, right? And you can expect people to have some knowledge of history, but you can't expect them to really have. I have many Polish friends, and they're extreme patriots, right? They're not just regular patriots; they're extreme patriots because they know what it was like to lose liberty. And only people who have faced communism head on, Cubans, Venezuelans, the Polish, and many others. They come to the United States and they can smell that communism coming miles away. And their children are brought up that way because you're their most prized legacy. So what are they going to do? They're going to teach you right from wrong. So you have this almost superpower, this sixth sense that I think so many people don't have. I only got this because it wasn't my parents that taught me this. It was being a teenager living where I lived. And I grew up with a lot of Cubans. And these Cubans, they could smell communism miles away, and they weren't playing. They were very vocal about how bad the regime was in Cuba, and it helps to shape your worldview, or one's worldview, I should say. So I think that's one part of it. Now, the second part of it is how do we get people informed? There's an active war going on, right? An active war of information that is ugly. It's an ugly war. So, yeah, it's great to listen to this program and others that are similar to it. Kudos to you if you're doing it and those who are doing it. Amen. But you're right. Reagan called on us to be informed patriots. And the only way we can truly be informed as patriots is if we understand our founding, we understand what informed the founding documents. And for me, as a young man, I was a student of the great one, Mark Levin, who was always talking about the historical context of why did the framers think the way they did, and made me want to read what they were reading, right? Things like On Democracy by Alexis de Tocqueville and others, John Locke and others that informed people that they themselves were informed by the Reformation. And the time of the Enlightenment. So, I mean, history plays a big part, and I think as much reading as one can do to understand these things will help people to understand. Now, if we are, I don't want to say lazy, because I don't think people are knowingly doing this, with a lack of zeal. But if you go to college in the United States, you've got, I'm going to guesstimate here, an 80% chance that some professor is going to try and indoctrinate you with either very ultra left-wing ideas, if not straight up Marxism. That's a real thing. You were kind of inoculated from that. It was like you had your parents as your quote unquote vaccine to protect you from that. But there's so many Americans that are falling by the wayside in this regard. So how do you inform people? I think that question's a little late. It's almost like, how do we deprogram people who have been misinformed or disinformed by the higher education establishment, right? The left-wing indoctrination mills that they are. How do we help people to understand, different sides of history? And I think while we have a great challenge ahead of us, we also have probably the best time to ever do it. You, me, anybody can pick up our cell phone and create a video. And that can be viewed by one person, 5 people, 10 people. It depends on, how good of a marketer you are and, how well you understand that process. But my point here is everybody has access to YouTube. You can either watch it or you can create stuff on it. And everybody has a way of doing something. I'm not telling you to go out and become the next Joe Rogan or anybody, right? I myself don't produce a lot of video. I prefer to do audio. But I know I should probably do more video. And all of us have an area where we could do a little more. For some people have told me oftentimes, hey, I loved your show and I liked the interview you did with X, Y, and Z. How do I get a link to that? That's why I occasionally mention it on the air, because I know that there's people out there that listen to this that aren't very tech savvy, but they can get a link and they copy and paste that link and they'll send it to 5 people they know and say, hey, listen to this interview. Very enlightening. And they will reach out to people. So that's, my own shameless plug on this show. But ultimately, I think we all of us, whether you're 80 years old and you're retired or you're 18 and you're just getting started as an activist, everybody has an area where they can do more, where they can contribute more to what they believe in, right? Not what I believe in, but what they believe in. So if they believe in an America that's free, an America where we embrace liberty, an America where they want to raise their children or have raised their children and hope that they can raise their grandchildren there, then amen, praise God, hallelujah. Let's move forward in that direction so that we're not getting more Brandon Johnsons in City Hall or people like Mad Manny, right? Zohran Mamdani in New York City. Because we are, in my opinion, there's an ebb and flow to the battle of information, the battle for truth. And there's days where we're winning it, but there's a lot of days where we get hit over the head by the left. And we've got to be able to combat them there. So whether it's, writing the op-ed in your local paper, being more active online with your current sphere of influence, or gaining more influence by doing more that way. Each one can teach one, is like the old saying. And ultimately, I think that's what we've got to do. And then the last point I want to make, and then I'm going to hit the break, is I don't necessarily agree with the idea that we get the government we deserve. And the reason why is because the way things are set up. I'll use New York City as an example. New York is a very red state, and it always goes blue because of one huge city that's incredibly populated. New York State isn't getting the government they deserve. They're getting the government that a bunch of rotten apples that live in New York City vote for each and every time. And they have enough people in New York City, in those 5 boroughs, to tip the scales and win the election over and over again. Why? Because there's no electoral college in the state of New York on a statewide election. So I don't think it's fair to say they get the government that they deserve. They get the government that their big liberal cities elect. And that's where we have to beat them, at the ballot box. Julie, thank you for your call. Very insightful, very thoughtful. Folks, I'm coming right back. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Thanks for what you do. You have so many people. You ask the questions that if a viewer had a microphone, they would ask that question, and you seem to always ask it right at the right time. So God bless you, my friend.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. It's the 10th of July, and we are 3 days away from the one-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on President Trump that grazed his ear. And, you know, they tried to take him out with a bullet to the head. And I'll never forget that day. Obviously, it was one of those days that, you know, goes down in history. I was at a restaurant, and I saw, he's actually a caller on this program, Moses from North Bergen, New Jersey. He's a firefighter, and he moonlights as a bartender. And I saw him at the bar, so I stopped by to say hello, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Trump's having a rally today." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I was just looking at it, and I had it open on my phone." No, I opened it after. He had it open on his phone, and he was like, "Yeah, I was just watching it," and he's showing me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it started already." Okay, because I was watching it on the TV, and literally as he's showing me on the phone, yeah, I'm just watching it, and he's like, the guy, you know, he's commenting on people. "Look at this lady in the audience. These people are nuts. It must be hot there." Blah blah blah. Right as that happened, it happened. The shots rang out. We watched the whole thing live, and in that moment where I was shaking his hand, the whole thing probably took but like a minute or a minute and a half, and then voila, there it was. And it was just so surreal, just a very, very surreal moment where I thought, like, this can't really be happening. And, you know, is Trump okay? And then he stands up and he pumps his fist 3 times and he pushes the Secret Service to the side and he yells, "Fight, fight, fight." And I was like, no freaking way. This is like history in the making over here. They tried to kill him. They literally couldn't get him. And then he stands up and he gives them the proverbial finger, right? Screaming with his fist in the air, "Fight, fight, fight." It was just such an epic moment, in my opinion. And we're on the cusp of the one-year anniversary of that. And what's remarkable about all of that is a year later, people have their panties in a twist about Jeffrey Epstein. People complain a little bit about this, but I don't hear anybody asking Pam Bondi or anybody else to resign. And I'm not saying she should. But I don't hear anybody saying that, you know, we're not satisfied with the outcome. What happened? Where were these failures? I think people yelled at the one Secret Service agent director that we had at the time. She resigned. The other guy, real big pendejo, the deputy director, until they got rid of him, the one who was always, you know, pleading and whining in congressional hearings. So he's gone too. And now we have a very solid Secret Service director. And that's fantastic. But there's still a lot of questions, right? The gentleman that was sitting behind President Trump after the bullet hits his ear, and it keeps going, and it kills the guy behind President Trump, a firefighter named Corey Imperator. And his widow was on the news giving an interview. And it's a very moving interview. We got a clip of it. I'm going to play it when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Switching gears to this now, everybody. New this morning, multiple Secret Service agents who were protecting President Trump on the campaign trail during last year's attempted assassination, they've now been suspended. Nick is tracking the new developments for us. Nick, why the delay on this? And also, how many agents are we talking here?
Investigators say that they were working to determine who exactly was responsible. And Marquee News Nation has learned that 6 Secret Service agents have been suspended 4 days before we mark 1 year since the first attempt on Mr. Trump's life. A source confirms to News Nation that the agents were suspended following an investigation and specifically for their actions in Butler, Pennsylvania. They include agents in supervisory roles and line agents. At a campaign rally on July 13, 2024, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks got off multiple shots at the president. One bullet grazed his ear. The gunman was killed by counter snipers, but one person in the crowd died and 2 others were injured. Congressional investigations found multiple breakdowns of communication between agencies and officers on that day, but stopped short of pinpointing a single moment or decision that nearly allowed a gunman to kill then-candidate Trump.
To kill candidate Trump. What a crazy turn of events, right? I mean, the fact that it happened, The fact that it's been so hard to pinpoint the moment or the action, crazy. The whole thing is crazy to me. You know, many of us think that they've got it all together. They're perfect. And listen, we haven't lost a president yet, right? To date, right? Following the last ones in recent history, I should say, right? After the Reagan shooting. You got to give the Secret Service credit for that. But you also have to, take the good with the bad. And it looks like they finally did that. And I'm glad that they did, so that on the anniversary in a day or two, they can talk about that. And they can deliver answers to the widow of the hero firefighter, Corey Imperator, who lost his life that day. The bullet meant for Trump's head grazed President Trump's ear and killed Corey Imperator. And as many of you who listen to this program, you know that the guy sitting right next to him who tried to save his life, stopping the bleeding, took off his shirt to rescue the guy. Right now his name escapes me, but we had him on and he gave that, eyewitness testimony. It was really moving to hear him give that account. And to think that, all of that happened and we hadn't made any improvements. And listen, the improvements are not necessarily firing people, but you want to make sure you pinpoint where things go wrong and make sure they don't happen again. So I'm happy to hear that things are happening. And we have a clip of the widowed Mrs. Imperator. We'll play that for you in the upcoming hour as well. So keep it locked right here, folks. We're coming right back. The third hour of the program is coming right up. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to another hour of our program, 7 minutes past the top of the hour. We're live and national this Thursday evening, and here is the phone number if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation. I welcome it. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And in the previous hour, we were talking about the upcoming anniversary of the assassination attempt on President Trump. And there was so much news around that, right? Who was this Matthew Crooks? Why didn't they see it? Why did the crowd tell the local cops? Why didn't the local cops get him? What took the sniper so long? When they gave the order? I mean, there's 1,000,002 questions. We learned yesterday, right? I believe it was yesterday. Or was it earlier today, that some odd number of people have now been suspended, people that were on scene that day, Secret Service agents and supervisors. Great. Hopefully that's what accountability looks like. But there's so much more fallout here, right? And I was talking earlier about the widow of Fire Chief Corey Imperator. And he was the guy that was killed after the bullet pierced President Trump's ear. It kept going, and it killed this man. And she gave an interview, I think it was yesterday. And she was so aghast. She was so beside herself in how this whole thing has been handled. And we have a little bit of a clip, because the key quote that came out of that interview was, she says the whole thing is garbage. Listen to this.
We were all sitting ducks that day. Our blood is all over their hands. I'm angry. I lost the love of my life.
of course, she's talking about her husband, and that is Helen Comparator, the widow of Corey Comparator, who was shot and killed at the campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, by the bullet intended for President Trump. And she's disgusted with the Secret Service. She said, "I think the Secret Service is garbage," she told the New York Post. "All I've wanted this entire time was to sit down with the men who screwed up that day and find out why. Why at that rally? Why at that one in Butler?" She just kept asking incredulously. And this is listen, I think everybody's heart bleeds and goes out to this woman. Nobody's going to tell her she's doing something wrong. She's not doing anything wrong. She's asking the right questions. And I'm glad she did that interview. And I'm glad it's making its way all over the place. And I'm glad that somebody in the White House, hopefully President Trump himself, said, "What's the status of this thing?" And nothing's happened. And he probably, shook a few trees. And voila, we got some people that are suspended. And now we can move on. But a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of questions around what happened with these people. Why were they suspended? Who didn't do what? And I don't know that we're going to get all those answers immediately. But I'm glad that we're going in that direction. And, there's some articles singling out one particular Secret Service agent. There's others were indicating that it's more people, 7 people, I think, or 11 people, according to the report that we played before. Ultimately, this family needs to heal, maybe some therapy, whatever it is that they have to do, right? They just have to mourn the loss, this horrible loss. They didn't do anything to earn this or to deserve it. In fact, I'd say quite the opposite. Their husband, her husband, the dad of this family, this guy fought fires, became a fire chief. Think about that. A guy who fights fires, cheating death, goes to a political rally and meets his maker. I mean, it's a terrible story. It really is a terrible story. It's not like he was diving in front of the bullet to save President Trump. I mean, he's really, wrong place, wrong time. This is tough. This is a tough one to swallow, and my heart goes out to the Comparator family. But ultimately, these questions need to be answered, the questions that she's asking. She deserves an answer to those questions. We all do, as the American people. And there's a lot of people that need to heal from this whole thing. And I want to spend this hour talking about, not per se about Trump and the shooting, but about healing, about people trying to get better, whether it's post a divorce, post a traumatic loss of a family member, a loved one, or something like that. We have so many people that since the time of COVID are engaging in psychotherapy, talk therapy, trying to, get the help of a professional, whether it's online or in person. And some seem to really benefit from that while others don't. And there's a debate that is emerging regarding these schools of thought, right? Varying and I would say conflicting schools of thought when it comes to therapy, psychotherapy. Some say that the Freudian model that brings everything back to some sort of wounded child is a flawed construct because the wounded child never heals. Therefore, it creates perpetual victimhood. I don't know if that's accurate or not, because this isn't my forte. But we've had a number of excellent guests on this program that could answer that question. And in being true to form, we're going to do that. We're going to bring in one of our pros, and they're going to answer that. But I want to ask you overall, the audience, kind of by and large, if people are engaging in psychotherapy for the sake of healing a particular wound, a childhood wound, is it working? Right? Are people actually seeing an improvement, or are they just being counseled to create boundaries where they cut people off and ultimately put themselves into isolation, and that's why they think they're better. And I'm not doubting the effectiveness of talk therapy. I'm just asking the questions that are being, kind of lobbed at us in this argument that the Freudian model is flawed. So I want to get to the bottom of that. I want to get to some of your calls as well. We talked about a number of things tonight, from getting locked up for free speech for posting a meme, and then eventually getting your conviction overturned, like happened to Douglas Mackey, or even the conversation we had with the doctor, Josh McConkey, who was just blown away by the fact that the White House physician, Joe Biden's White House physician, couldn't answer in the affirmative that he was never asked to lie about the health of the president, and that he never himself questioned the president's fitness to serve. Imagine not answering those two questions when you're a trained physician and you're under oath. Unbelievable. The fact that he pled the Fifth Amendment really lets me believe that he didn't want to incriminate himself. And that was very eye-opening. So if you haven't heard that, don't worry. You'll have a chance to hear it coming up. But wow, just so much to talk about. So I want you to keep it locked right here, folks. We have a very interesting hour. We're going to do a deep dive here on how effective is therapy. And for the people doing therapy online, and I don't mean like BetterHelp and stuff like that. I mean, like the people that, go to Dr. TikTok or Dr. Instagram to diagnose their own problems and, use an AI chatbot to get information. Is AI messing them up? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of all of that straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Thanks for what you do. You have so many people. You ask the questions that if a viewer had a microphone, they would ask that question, and you seem to always ask it right at the right time. So God bless you, my friend.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Modern psychotherapy and psychology is profoundly narcissistic. How you feel is the message of most psychotherapists. Every psychologist and psychiatrist I've had on my radio show for decades, I've asked, how many in your profession are competent? And they almost all answer the same, about a third. So 2/3 are incompetent. That's correct. A lot of therapists are there to reinforce the patient's feelings of being a victim, which is usually a perverse form, or not perverse, psychopathologic form of self-centeredness. It's narcissism. Oh, you feel you were hurt by your parents? You certainly were. Instead of, you know what, everybody's hurt by their parents. That's part of life, and it's time for you. You're now 25. This happened when you were 9. It's time for you to grow up. How many therapists say that? They're afraid they'll lose a patient, and then they probably will. People often go to therapists to feel vindicated in their victimhood, not to actually get better.
That is Dennis Prager, PragerU. You've probably heard him on the radio for many, many years. And I think he makes a number of very solid points there. And this is not to attack or poo-poo therapy. I'm a big proponent of it. As you know, I oftentimes sit back in my leather chaise lounge and allow Jill Robin Payne to conduct psychotherapy sessions with me right here live on the air. And we're going to do that today. But I want to get her take and reaction to what Dennis Prager had to say, as well as others that say that the Freudian model is good at bringing things to the forefront, but not so good at processing those feelings and emotions and problems once they do arise. So with that being said, I want to bring in Jill Robin Payne. She's a psychotherapist and author of the Bempathy series of books, excellent books. I happen to have all of them. And she often speaks at different conferences and whatnot, and she's a regular on our program. Jill Robin Payne, welcome back.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. And I want you to hear yet another clip that I've got of
Okay.
Raquel Hawkins. She is a life coach that is pitching her services as taking people from right where Dennis Prager left off, saying, all right, so now you found your injured child, 9 years old. Now what? Time to grow up, he says. She says there's more to it, moving beyond the language that you've learned. Listen to this.
So first it starts with hope. You go to therapy looking for answers, meaning, clarity, and your therapist gives you the words to explain your chaos. Trauma response, trauma bonding, parentified, attachment styles, inner child. And for a moment, it feels like freedom, right? You finally have a name for what you couldn't explain. You understand why you are the way that you are. Language brings clarity, but clarity brings emotional fallout. You start to realize I didn't get what I needed. I was always the responsible one. No one protected me. I didn't even know I was surviving. And that realization, it doesn't always lead to healing. Sometimes it leads to a reaction spiral. Resentment for what you've missed, bitterness towards people who didn't show up, over adjusting your life in the name of boundaries or peace, sabotaging what you have now because it doesn't match what you should have had. You start rearranging your world to make up for what you didn't get. But the rearranging never stops. You weren't meant to live in the language. You were meant to move through it. And if you call it healing, but it's really grief, exhaustion, and emotional correction, emotional overcorrection, I would say. Insight is just the beginning. If you stop there, you don't grow, you loop. You try to feel better instead of getting stronger. That's why so many people go to therapy and they still feel stuck, because they understand their pain, but they never build the capacity to live beyond it.
They don't have the capacity to live beyond the pain. And I think that's the key statement there, right? This is not so much a critique on the psychotherapy, but more so a critique, I guess, on the expectation of each individual client or patient and their willingness to move beyond it. Jill Robin Payne, what do you think of what both of these audio clips explained?
Well, I think that I'm totally different than both of those individuals. I will say that I agree I have a statement. When you bring the past to the present, it becomes your future. It's a quote that I have in my Meeting People book, because I have found when you bring the past to the present, that's what you're going to be focusing on. So it's how do you bring the past to the present? I like to think of things or people as an onion, and you peel it very slowly. If you have an onion, believe me, and you take 24 hours to peel it, you will not cry. It's how fast you do it. So so it depends on how you're doing it. And I usually have my clients come in, and if there's baggage holding them back, if it's bubbling up, we'll touch on it and we'll see how can that baggage motivate you to get from A to B, to be a better person. Because if you dwell on the past, you're going to live in it. And now there's some people that are so traumatized, Rich, that they need to have trauma counseling. They really do. And sometimes they need to have IOP, which is intense outpatient. So, so these are people that have been deeply traumatized. I'm talking about people that have had trauma, even people that have been raped or abused in some way. It depends on how deep their PTSD is. It really does.
Right.
But most people, if you take them and do it slowly, I even tell people if they're on medication, give it 6 months to a year to get on the right medication. It's a process. Everything's a process. And I think people just want to tear the scab off. And if you tear the scab off, then it's like Rochelle says, you got an open wound. So what you do is, when people get old, like my mom's 92, you use a little bit of alcohol and you gradually take the Band-Aid off so it doesn't rip her skin off. There you go. So that's my theory.
I knew you would have a logical response to that, because I feel like there's a lot of people that listen to either one of those clips and think, that's, what's going on. And it's something we've talked about as well in the past, where I think a lot of people are self-diagnosing on TikTok and Instagram and other places. And they've become the new Jill Robin Payne, right? They're ready to label everybody else everything in the book. And
Right.
nobody seems to be talking about, at least maybe the pros are, but not the layman, talking about what that process of peeling the onion looks like and how quickly. And I love the analogy you made, because I think that's a big part of it. And
Right.
I wanted to also, get your take on people who are using Chat GPT and other AI operated therapy tools, right? That aren't designed for therapy, but I think people use them. And overall, what is
Right.
AI doing to people and their ability to think critically? So stick with me, Jill Robin Payne. We're going to come right back. Amigos, we're on with Jill Robin Payne, psychotherapist and author, and we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
With artificial intelligence blasting its way into our society, it's hard not to be excited, especially if you're a college student. I mean, the researching process just became a fraction of the time and effort it used to require, because now we have programs like ChatGPT that are essentially language processing tools. But more so than that is they will find information we're searching for, and it's going to deliver it back to you in a conversational medium. So what does this mean for research? Well, the possibilities are endless, and quite frankly, it minimizes your effort in the researching process. But as with anything that sounds too good to be true, there's always a downside. In this case, a dark side. Because when you use artificial intelligence for learning, it will impact what you learn. There's no sugarcoating that, because quite frankly, anything you apply artificial intelligence to, it's going to water down whatever that thing was, because it's minimizing human involvement in the process. So when it comes to research, it's going to find you information, it's also going to process it, and then it's even going to articulate it back to you. So notice how much of your involvement in the researching process has been minimized.
So what is the effect that artificial intelligence is having on our critical thinking ability? I want to get to the bottom of that with our guest, Jill Robin Payne, psychotherapist and author of the Empathy book series. And Jill Robin Payne, you just heard that clip that we got right from the Smart Student YouTube page. And interesting take. I don't know that I agree with all of it, but a very interesting take, to say the least. What are your thoughts on that clip?
Well, in life, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So I know for a fact with my body, if I go away on my vacation, which I didn't lift weights, then my arms seem to sort of change shape, if you know what I mean. So, if you don't, okay, so the same with your brain. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And that's sort of what's happening. They just did a study. This was in June. It's still going to be going through peer review. And what they found was exactly what she's saying, is that they did 3 groups, Rich, and it's an MIT study. They took 3 groups, and they had one group that they called the brain group, because the people used their brains. The other group used Google, and the other group used ChatGPT. And you know what they found out. They found out that what they were supposed to do was they were going to do a 20-minute essay. And they did this 3 times, 3 essays. And so at the end of this study, what they found out was that the brain group had the highest level of brain activity, and they felt satisfied. They loved what they did. And ChatGPT group that didn't think, just did chat, they had the lowest brain activity, and they weren't real satisfied. And that's what's happening in our world. So it's not just affecting our brain, it really is affecting how we're feeling. And I've noticed with a lot of my young clients that they have, and I think I've told you this before, a flatter affect, a blunted affect. They're just not moving enough, and it's really causing people just to feel sort of blah. And so then they need more of this stimulation from these electronics. So the more you use chat, the dumber we're going to get. And that's just how it is. It's going to affect our critical thinking. And, I really am concerned about the erosion of our human skills, because it's not just our brain, it's our whole body. Our brain and our head is attached to our body's attached to our head, and we really need to be more physical. That's what we need to do.
With this blunted or flattened affect, what type of impact is that having on one's mental health overall?
It's making them feel blah. So you'll see studies, and I'm not disagreeing with the studies that these people that were on the internet, we get a ping, we get a dopamine rush, and then our dopamine level is supposed to raise, so our baseline gets higher, so we have to keep going on and on. Yes, that is affecting our mood. What really, I think, is affecting our mood is our facial expressions, a body movement. It's a known fact, Rich. If you walk, it increases your cognitive ability. It gets blood flow. It gets you to feel better and think better. So that's just walking every day. And if we're sitting every day looking at a screen, and instead of going out and playing with our people, we're doing gaming, we are going to have a blunted affect, and it's going to affect our moods. And it's going to affect our motivation. It's affecting a lot of things.
Yeah, I hear that. So what's your recommendation for, the younger generation that's more inclined to use ChatGPT for more than, Generation X or boomers?
Yeah, well, I talk to a lot of my youngins, and they'll tell me, gosh, Jill, I wish I knew that. And I think we need to educate them. No one is telling you about the pros or the cons with what's going on in the world. We're just being, a new phone. I need to get a new phone. I just got my new phone 6 months ago. Well, there's another one. I got to get it. And so we need to let them know, how does this affect you? What are some better avenues you can do that's going to make you feel better? And I think that's what we need to do. We need to also educate parents. Parents, I think, need to have family meetings, family gatherings, and I think that it is going on, Rich. I think it's about 50-50. I haven't done my study, but with the clients that I see, I think it's 50-50. It's 50% of the people are staying really social, and then there's another 50% that are going down the machine way. So I think we just need to educate people, and that's families, communities. And I think if you know cocaine is going to do this to you, you're going to think twice about taking cocaine.
Right. Just saying no.
Or how much. Yeah, right. Well, or how to use it. Because I think we need to use chat as a tool, not as a device to to think and write all our papers, but to maybe banter back and forth and get some ideas. Because AI has something called hallucinations. So you can't even really trust their accuracy, because they're just feeding you information. They're not fact checking. They are not fact checking, and people think they
just scour and regurgitate.
Yep, that's all they do.
Jill Robin Payne, you mentioned that you were on vacation and you didn't go to the gym. I also was on vacation at the same time, and I know that because we were going to meet at my studio in New York City, but we had to postpone that because of my vacation days. And that's what I was thinking while I was gone. I was thinking, my goodness, if I eat one more thing in this all-you-can-eat buffet, I'm going to come back a lot rounder than when I left. And I did have a good time, though. How did you enjoy your vacation? You were visiting the Big Apple.
Yeah, well, I went to Connecticut on Long Island, so I was across the sea, across the water, and it's my favorite place. We used to have a beach house there till I was 48, so it's my happy place. So I'm going to just tell you, I was happy. I did not want to come home, and I was just telling Alex that I was so happy that guess what I did when I came home?
What'd you do?
Okay, thanks. I took down the TV set. I took it down because. Yeah, we had no TV when we were up there, and my husband and I had a blast. And so he and I both agreed. We have a computer, we have a phone. We don't need a TV. We took it down. We have done more reading, more talking, and
Wow, that's
having
great.
having more.
And
yeah.
you were staying on Long Island Sound.
Yes, I was. And
great down
yeah, Westbrook, Connecticut. It's lovely. I love it.
Fantastic.
Love to get a place there.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
I missed you, and I'm hopeful that when you come back to visit, you can check out the studio and we can do an interview in person.
I'm looking forward to that. Yes,
Me
I'm
too.
taking you up on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, 100%. And Jill Robin Payne, I want you to let everybody know, how do they follow you? How do they get your books? Where do they go?
Okay, so Amazon has my books. Also, Meeting People, It's Not a Game is on all the audio sites. At Jill Robin Payne is the name of my platform, and JillRobinPayne.com is my website. They can email me, and I would love to hear from them.
Jill Robin Payne, like always, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. I'm grateful for you sharing all this information with us, and looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
It was great talking to you, Rich.
Godspeed. All right, amigos, we continue. Your thoughts, your calls. Open Phone America is coming up right now. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Were you ever told to lie about the president's health?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer. I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
That is Dr. Kevin O'Connor, President Biden's White House physician, who says, I'm not telling you if I was ever asked to lie. Nope, not telling you if I thought he was not fit to serve. What kind of doctor is this? I want to get your thoughts, reactions, and calls on this stuff. Let's go to Tommy. No, who was asking about the doctor? What's going on with these calls here? Tony, Montreal, WVMT. Go right ahead.
Yeah, Rich, how you doing? I just wanted to mention, like, this Dr. O'Connor, he wants to advocate that he's going to protect the president by invoking the doctor-patient privilege, but at the same time, he invokes the Fifth Amendment. Like, why would you invoke the taking the Fifth if you have nothing to hide and there's no criminality involved? If you're not going to self-incriminate yourself, why would you advocate that in front of the Congress, in front of Comer, who's trying to find out whether or not Joe Biden was, non compos mentis? Why would you do that? I've never heard of that. And beyond that, why did the current physician or then physician hide the fact that Joe Biden had stage 5 cancer? You don't get that overnight. That's something that he developed over years and years. And they kept saying he's fine and he's can do his job. The question is, Rich, the president was not well. Who was running the country? And that's a greater evil than Watergate. That's an even greater danger. It's like a military junta or a political junta took over the United States government because he was not competent enough to do this. Imagine the physician himself has to invoke this type of protection to prevent him from, let's say, becoming criminalized. I just don't understand that. It's the first time I've ever seen it, and it's unbelievable that it gives credence to everything that Trump has been saying that there's been an auto pen, there's been someone else running the country, and I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And
Listen,
I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think if I were advising them politically, Tony, I would say exactly what you just said. I would say if you want to oppose Trump and you want to make Trump look like he's wrong here, then you go in there and you tell him how great things were. But instead, they go in there and they more cover up, which clearly leads people to think, okay, so Trump was right yet again. Now, I'll turn the tables here, Tony, and I will say, what would you advise them if you were their attorney?
If I was the attorney and I was advising this doctor, I would tell him before I went in, I would have my attorneys speak to the attorneys for whoever was doing the oversight committee investigation. If it's Comer, I would speak to his lawyers and say, listen, I can spill the beans, but I want immunity. And I would ask for immunity. If I thought that people were pressuring me as a doctor, and it's truly possible someone was pressuring this gentleman, that he would say, look, I was put under a tremendous amount of pressure by a number of individuals, name them, but I want immunity. And if he would have gotten immunity, he could have spilled the beans. But the way it turns out now, he's just giving credence to all of the conspiracy theories that are out there, and he's giving credence to what Trump has said, that Joe Biden was not competent. There was a fake presidency going on, and at worst, this gives credence to the fact that Trump had his election stolen. Because it's just manipulation. It's, again, I come back to the same, cash, corruption, criminality, and the Democrats, this is their game plan, Rich. And if they had a competent lawyer, I mean, I think any country lawyer from Maine could have given better advice to this doctor. And that's what I would have advised. And I'm not saying I'm a great lawyer. I'm a retired lawyer now. But as I said, back when I was giving people advice, I would give them advice along those lines. If they were going to be implicated in any criminality and the prosecution wanted to, an assistance from them, they would get immunity, obviously. And this is something that wasn't investigated, or it was investigated, or someone was pulling the strings and telling Dr. O'Connor, listen, we're not going that route. You're just going to have to invoke your protections, and that's it. But worst of all, you have Miss Crockett coming along and pontificating that she's some amazing lawyer. Rich, she's no lawyer. She's made some kind of a claim in university that she was racially profiled, or she suffered racial prejudice. And she went to, I believe, Johnny Cochran's law firm. And then from there, she became an intern. And from there, she became an attorney. So I don't think she has any barroom etiquette. I can tell you I've had over 32 years of high-profile criminality trials and constitutional trials. So Miss Crockett is a neophyte, if anything, and I'm pretty sure any American lawyer that's listening right now will say she's in the lower categories of her abilities. That's for sure, and she's certainly not proving it by the way she speaks. But like I said in the beginning, I think that this is an indication that there is something that is behind the whole issue of the incompetence. And we've mentioned this word before, non-compos mentis. Non-compos mentis is the meaning that you don't have the mental acuity to run, whether it's a company or the country or even run a business, because you're not mentally fit. And, that's the dangerous part.
It totally is. Tony, I got to leave it right there. We got to take a pause right here. Folks are coming right back. The rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, to the phones we go. Open Phone America, wrapping it up now. 833-482-5337. Tommy. They look alike without my glasses. Tommy, Columbia, South Carolina, WQXL. Tommy, go right ahead.
Right. Young Mr. Crooks was shooting at Mr. Trump at Butler with a .223 ammo. It's very high velocity, about 3 times the speed of sound. My first encounter with high-velocity bullets was in basic training in 1966. Machine gun shooting over us, crawling along under barbed wire, and you could hear the bullet go over, but it didn't whiz at all. It popped because it was breaking the sound barrier. Then you could hear the muzzle blast. You hear pop, pop, pop. from the bullet right overhead, and then the boom, 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 the muzzle blast. So one thing that Mr. Trump said right off, and I'm connecting dots. I remember some of this, and a lot of people have forgotten it. It's reported that Trump said that he heard a bullet whiz by first thing. If it whizzed, it wasn't Mr. Crooks shooting supersonic bullets. It was a subsonic shot. And maybe the reason that Trump turned his head, something whizzed by and he turns his head, what was that? And right then, the next shot got him in the ear, and that's probably young Mr. Crooks. And they had a picture of the bullet, of a bullet.
Well, you know, part of, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. I've fired plenty of 223s. The issue here is if Crooks let off, I think he let off 8 shots, or at least there were 8 shots in total. If he let off just, let's say, 2, right? He shoots the first one. That one whizzes by Trump's head, hits the guy behind him. Then the second one that hits him, he may not necessarily hear that one, right? But he definitely hears the first one that goes by. So I don't know that it suggests that there's a second shooter, but I'm open to the idea. Tommy, thanks for the call. Amigos, hasta la próxima. I'm Rich Valdez. God bless.